Yeah. You know, when I auditioned for the first movie of Mortal Kombat, I auditioned for Johnny Cage, and I read with Cameron Diaz.
No
she
way.
was going to play the
Be
female.
Sonya?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she didn't get it, and I didn't get it. But Larry Kazanoff was in on that, and I think that from that led to me doing the television series later on.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio/video. There's a little bit of pre-show humor that's just for Jeff and I. And today I am joined by Jeffrey Meek, and we're going to have a great conversation. I'm Jeremy Lesniak, host here for the show, founder of Whistlekick, where everything we do is in support of traditional martial arts. If you want to know what that means, if you want to understand the connect, educate, and entertain philosophy, if you want to know why I'm so big on getting everyone in the world to train for 6 months, please go to whistlekick.com and learn more about all the things that we're doing. And if you want to go all the way to the basement, all the way across, all the things related to this show, go to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. You can check out every episode we've ever done, the show notes, the links. You can subscribe to our exclusive Martial Arts Radio newsletter and get emailed every single time we release a new episode with links right there in the email so you never miss another great installment. And with that, Jeff, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, you've got quite a body of work. I'm sure we're going to move around. Some of it is a little more relevant to our audience than others, and that's okay. But I'm going to ask you, is there a place you want to start?
Well, I just, it is martial arts is such a, major part of my career.
Yeah.
I started off, I guess, the martial arts part of my career started off before I was even an actor. I started boxing when I was in school and, did some wrestling in high school. And I was really interested in martial arts when I was even a little kid, just growing up watching Bruce Lee and, Chuck Norris and, some of the great...
Do you remember your first martial arts movie?
Yeah, Enter the Dragon.
For so many people remember their very first martial arts movie.
Yeah, and it was huge. I watched it like 15 times.
Believe it.
And I loved it. I just think, it hasn't been, martial arts aside, there's not too many people in the history of cinema that has more charisma than Bruce Lee. He was so solid and so, he was a real movie star. And also the Jackie Chan stuff that came after that. And, and also, I loved doing it. It kept me in shape as an actor too, because I was a football, basketball, baseball guy when I was in high school and college. And I loved playing tennis, and I was, kind of a jock for the most part. Strangely enough, I was still in the theater department, which was very kind of, paradoxical.
Yeah.
And so, my father was, he was a football player in high school. In fact, he was, I think, honorable mention All-American as a football player. So I had to play football. It was one of those things.
Of course.
And so I loved it. I loved the skill set of it. I loved, basketball. I think it's just such a magnificent sport. I loved baseball. I loved just everything about team sports too. But the individual part of it, I also liked tennis and I liked martial arts. And I liked the individual quality of boxing because it's just you and God and the opponent. It really is an amazing way to stay in shape too. And so when I started acting, just to keep myself, in shape, I started going to work out and I'd go to I started training in Aikido and I started training in Taekwondo and I loved it. And then but I was primarily an actor. I really wanted to. I was in the theater for 10 years before I was in a Shakespeare company for a brief period of time. And then I got lucky and I got into some television stuff. And then after that, I was asked to do a show called Remo Williams. And it was based on the movie that, I don't know if you remember the movie. It was with Fred Ward and Joel Grey. and it was about a guy who was a
Mm.
cop in Chicago that didn't really have a family. So what they faked his death, and then they trained him to be this sort of ninja character by this sort of pseudo Korean character that was played by Joel Grey, which you can't do anymore. It was this white guy playing a Asian character. And so when they did the pilot, I was auditioning for it because I could do some of the martial arts and I could get through it. And so Joel Grey played it in the movie, but they were trying to cast the older character, and they were a little bit reticent about hiring me because I was new. And so they liked what I did in my audition and everything, but they were just, I think they wanted a bigger name. And so I asked, or I think my manager asked them, could I possibly read for the lead character, for the Chun character, the Asian mentor? And could I read with them in their audition, which was kind of a, ploy, I guess. It was fun. And so I read with everybody, and there was a lot of stars that came in to read for that. And one of them was Roddy McDowall.
Mm.
And Roddy McDowall and I kind of hit it off. And then he walked over to the producers as I was standing there in the audition room. And he said, so who's playing Remo? And they said, well, we haven't cast it yet. And he said, well, what about him? And he looked at me and they looked at me and I went, I'd be happy to do it. So they ended up giving me a shot. And I think that Roddy McDowall had a lot to do with that. And so we shot the pilot, tons of action in it. I mean, I had to surf down some water off a 3-story building. I had to dive off of a 4-story building and
Were you doing
run
your
through
own
fire.
work?
I was doing all my gags, but I had a great stunt coordinator, Bobby Bass from Stunts Unlimited, who was a god at the time. And my stunt double was Chad Randall, who was considered one of the great stunt guys in Hollywood ever. And he did a lot of the work on some of the gags that are really super dangerous, because a lot of times, unless you're Tom Cruise and you're actually paying for the movie, the Bond company won't let the star do the gags. So I was stuck with doing most of them, but the ones where there was me hitting the ground, you can't do. That's why they call him a fall guy, of course, because, they're the ones that are taking the fall. Because they're afraid of breaking the actor. Because you break the actor and then the show closes down and then there's nothing going on anymore. So I did a lot of this stuff there. I got hurt in that show, though. I got blown up once and I got shot in the neck. That was really interesting. My hair started on fire. I felt like Michael Jackson. My hair started on fire because this fence, they tried to use this C4 on a fence to make it look like it sparked. Because I threw a wire on it. The character throws a wire on it and it's supposed to spark. And so he had taken C4 and put it on. He didn't know how to make it spark otherwise. And it blew the whole fence into my face. This is back in the day. There's no CGI back then. And so it's singed my eyelids closed to the other eyelid. If I hadn't closed my eye, I'd have lost my eye. But my hair started on fire. I was going, okay, that's not happening. And so then the same guy, he does a gag in the show where it was no. So anyway, he got fired. And but there was a lot of stuff that I had to do. I had to run through fire. There was lots of explosions. It was really a big action-packed pilot. Now it was going to be on the docket for the network, but the company that did it was the film company. And so the film company that did Remo Williams, they had never done any television before. And so it was real film quality. It was really great, but they were a little late in delivering it to the studio. So they were a little hesitant of actually giving him a go on the series. But the pilot was terrific. It was really fun. And Roddy was great. And it was just really a good little piece. But that introduced me to the networks and as somebody that could do action stuff. And I did a lot of gags that were really pretty outrageous. And so that led
like a lot of stuff that maybe someone in your position today coming in being kind of green, wouldn't get all those opportunities.
No, no. If I, but I had to show them that I could do the action.
Yeah.
So there was a fight choreographer that had to come in and work with me. There was, they had to check to see whether or not I was physically fit to actually handle the part, because it was an
Mm.
incredibly physical part. It was difficult. So, and that started me really training, because I wanted to get my body in shape. I wanted to look good on camera, whatever the case may be. But I was, really doing a lot of work, just trying to deal with weapons and knives and guns and, just a lot of martial arts too. And then after I did I did a series in New York, a little short stint there. And then I did another pilot, and then I did Raven. Actually, I did a pilot and a series in France called The Exile. And it was about a guy that was, he was a joint CIA, um, KGB agent. He was a double agent. So when the wall came down in the 90s, um, the KGB thought he was a double agent, and the CIA on the other side, his liaison, his only source or connection to the CIA, was murdered. And so he ends up being this sort of lost soul in France. Yeah, tough gig. But the character had to do a lot of, real espionage stuff. There was a lot of action in that show, a lot of shoot 'em ups and a lot of physical fighting and running. And, it was just really a very action packed thing. So CBS, who had done this joint production with the French, it was sort of a French American production. They were trying to find ways to raise money, to shoot television. And also the French wanted to learn a little bit more about how Americans made TV. And so after I did that for about a year and a half, they canceled the series, but I got called in to audition for Raven, which was he's essentially a ninja that grew up in Japan, and he ends up trying to find his son in Hawaii. And so I had to train a lot. I was even training in France to prepare for that pilot. And I worked with some really great martial artists, Jeffrey Meek and Al Leong. And then I was doing a movie with, at that time, I was also doing a movie that I was supposed to be in. It ended up not working out, but I trained for 6 months with Benny the Jet Urquidez, who in my opinion is probably one of the greatest kickboxers in history.
Absolutely.
And that guy beat the shit out of me. I mean, he really was amazing. And he just, but he trained me every day. I'd be in his gym for at least 4 or 5 hours a day for 6 months. You get fairly good after, otherwise you break. But I really enjoyed that, and that was for a film that was called Ford Fairlane, The Rock and Roll Detective, with Andrew Dice Clay. But what had happened is that after I trained for 6 months, Robert Englund, who was Freddy Krueger, do you remember the movie? He became available somehow, and so Fred Silver, who was the producer of the picture, decided he was going to fire me and then hire Robert Englund. He had to pay me for the whole gig, because I'd been working for 6 months. But so that led me into doing Raven, and then Raven I worked with Billy Blanks and Howard Jackson and Jeffrey Meek, and just so many great martial artists came through there too. It was really a great education to do that show. And then after that, I ended up doing a bunch of pictures, and then I did a series called Mortal Kombat Conquest, which was some of the best martial artists in the world kicking butt on that show. That was really fun. I played 2 characters on that show. I played Raiden and Shao Kahn, which was a gas. That was really fun. It's an interesting time, because I auditioned about 6 times for Raiden, and then when I went into,
why so many?
I don't know why. I don't know why. They were trying to figure out whether or not I was tall enough or whatever. I don't know. But I was in there for the 6th time, and there was the Mortal Kombat people, and there was Larry Kazanov, and there was the Fern Champion is the casting director, and I was reading for Raiden, and I was thinking, after 6 times, you guys better give me this part, okay? And so after I finished reading, they sort of whispered to each other, and I'm going, uh-oh. And so they whispered to each other a little bit more, and then Fern Champion gets up and hands me another script. It says, here, read this. And I went, oh, man. So you wanted to audition for another character? I was thinking this. I wasn't saying this out loud, but I was thinking, oh, you got to be kidding. Now I'm furious, okay? And so Shao Kahn is he is like the devil.
Hey.
And so they said, do you want to step outside and read, and go through it? And I said, nah, let me just read it right now. I'm in the mood. And I just said, if you like it, you want to make adjustments, then go ahead, we'll make an adjustment. But I'm not going on anywhere. And so I just let them have it. And then they started whispering to each other a little bit more. And then Fern turned to me and she went, would you like to play both parts? And I went, what? You want to play both? And I said, I get paid for both? And they went, absolutely. And I went, yeah, let's go have some fun in Florida. So
it's a trip.
Yeah, really a trip.
You think you would have gotten the Shao Kahn part if you hadn't been, irritated?
It's a really good question. I maybe not, because it was authentic. I was pissed.
That's what I'm hearing, and anybody who knows, that Mortal Kombat universe knows that that's kind of an important component to that character.
I was just so irritated. I didn't even want to read it. I was just going to go, I'm just going to vomit all over you people and see what happens. So that was perfect, I guess, for the part. So anyway, but that was fun. That was a great show. What great people. Really fun. I just loved it. Some of my, I still have dear friends from that show. And it's just, what a group. What an amazing group. Yeah, it was really fun. That was a great gig too. But I'll tell you what, though, if I played Raiden, everybody wanted to hang out with me. If I played Shao Kahn and put the mask on, I was just a loner, man. Nobody on that set ever came up to me and said hello. They were just scared. It was really weird. I felt so lonely
in there,
as Shao Kahn.
Isn't there?
What's that?
There's a compliment in there that you're playing it well if they don't want to hang out.
There's a very lonely part.
Or you could just call it method, right? I've heard actors talk about, they get into certain roles and, they just get so immersed in the loner aspect or the rude aspect of that character. And so you could just,
I subscribe to that. If you get the opportunity to be a little bit method, Daniel Day-Lewis has the luxury, he'd get a part, a year in advance of what he was doing.
Yeah.
Well, how luxurious is that for an actor? It's often, most of the time you just only have a very short period of time to prepare for a part. But someone like that, he's got a year, 6 months to work. He can go and hang out and, build the village that he's going to be living in as the character. He's,
right.
When he did The Crucible, he actually, I think for 6 months, he built the town of Salem, and he was out there, putting it together and living in that condition and not bathing. And
I haven't heard that, but none of that surprises me.
Yeah.
Then again, it's Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yes, exactly. And so you
can't argue with the results.
A great actor, had an opportunity to know what he was dealing with. Sure. I would do the same thing. It's like doing a play. Usually you have 6 weeks to rehearse a play. You don't have that in film and television. And so those 6 weeks are tremendously luxurious for an actor to be able to connect to the character. That's what, for me, that's what a method is that I have a chance to immerse myself in that character. Why not? And so during the day when you're shooting too, it's troubling to go in and out of the character. It really is. It's hard to, differentiate unless you're Marlon Brando, it's hard to do. And so the isolation for me when I was doing the show was actually, useful. And,
could see that.
I could. The most distracting part about playing Shao Kahn, though, I have to say, is that the throne that he was sitting in, is backlit, and it would light the catwalk where all of the tour would be going through. And so it's the most distracting thing as an actor to see, baby carriages and tourists in shorts scratching themselves as they're going, waving at you as you're writing a take. It's a little much. It was a little much. So after a while, we try to figure out, could you just, when we're rolling, could you have stop? Just don't move around, but incredibly distracting. But that studio was amazing. I loved working at MGM. Loved working at, it was Disney, really. I lived in Celebration. Do you know where that is?
No.
Celebration is a planned community. It's a Disney planned community. It's right next to the center there, and so it's just a bridge over to from over the freeway. And so it's planned everything. It's a Stepford kind of place. It's sort of it's the same guy that designed the Truman Show, the Jim Carrey movie. Is the same guy that designed that. That's my understanding of it. Is the same guy that designed that. So it was me, and I was playing Shao Kahn, so I had a shaved head. And I told them if I was going to play Raiden and Shao Kahn, I don't want to wear a wig over my hair, and I don't want to have a skull cap on me if I'm going to be the bald guy. So I said, I will shave my head, but the deal is that if I shave my head, then you as a makeup artist or a hair designer, you have to shave my head whenever I want it. And so every time I'd come in the morning, even if I wasn't working, they'd have to shave my head. But I was, driving around in a beach bike in Celebration with my golf bag on my back, with my sunglasses on my little bald head. I looked like Uncle Fester going to the... and everybody thought I was insane. But the rest of the actors thought it was a little weird to live there, so they lived mostly in town in the apartment. They thought it was kind of strange there, but I loved it. The golf course was amazing. It's right down the street. There was a huge gym there with a basketball court. It was fabulous. Had a pool. There was a huge pond. They would even have fake snow during the winter time in the halls. It was a fabulous place.
It's like
good
sounds
restaurants.
Like a cool spot.
I loved it.
Cool spot.
It was a good gig.
I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of actors who are also martial artists, and I'm phrasing it this way with intent. And I found that most of them were one that also did the other, but they primarily identified as, I'm an actor who does martial arts, or I'm a martial artist who acts.
Right.
I don't know which category to put you in the way you've talked.
Yeah. I'm an actor.
You're an actor who does martial arts.
Yeah, because I never, I think martial artists for the most part is somebody that competes in it, You
talked about martial arts at a, pretty early on, even before TV and movies anyway.
Yeah. Well, I got bullied as a kid too.
Okay.
And so I wanted to, protect myself, and my brother was bigger than me. And so I wanted to kick his ass too. He was a year and a half older than me and just beat the hell out of me. And so I decided, okay, I'm just going to I'll be Bruce Lee. So I just wanted to beat my brother up. And so that's how I got into it, really, is that I didn't want to be bullied anymore. I was getting picked on. I was kind of small until I was about a junior in high school. I was about 5'2" as a sophomore. And then I grew a whole foot between my junior year and my senior year. So a lot of people got their comeuppance my junior and senior year. And also too, I've been training and I've been playing sports. So I was in good shape. I was skinny, but I was in good shape, And so, I would say that I'm an actor first. I really wanted to be, Laurence Olivier. I wanted to be, great at what I did. So I trained very hard to be a good actor. So I think the reason that I got hired quite a bit, is because I'm an actor that could do it pretty well. I had trained for a while. And also I was a pretty good athlete. I wasn't great, but I was a good athlete. And so I can fake it pretty good too, But I really love it. I think it's a great thing for everybody to do. I think it's a marvelous way to get centered and connected to your body and how to move in the world. And, that the floor is your friend. And the older I get, the more I realize that Aikido is really a lifesaver as you get old. What's the main problem for older people is falling, but falling doesn't seem to be an issue, except for last year. I fell off a 12-foot ladder. That was kind of insane.
What were you doing?
I was trimming trees.
Yeah.
And then I was an idiot. I was on a wooden ladder. And the wooden ladder, I didn't fall. The wooden ladder snapped underneath me. The two legs of it at the same time snapped, so I got pitched. And I was landing on my head, and I spun my whole training in midair. I'm thinking, get on, float back, slap. And so I slapped the ground, but hit the pavement and broke my hand. And so, but I didn't hit my head.
Right.
I landed just fine. Didn't hurt my back. Didn't hurt anything else. But I broke my hand from slapping the ground.
Seems like as good of an outcome as you could have.
Mat. I was hitting the mat.
That's right.
But it saved me. But otherwise, I was heading from hitting my head. But it was the training comes in handy. It really does. And also just how you carry yourself. How you feel confident enough to be in the world. I think it's just a great thing to do. And I have such admiration for, fighters and MMA guys, and I just love it. I love watching it. I love great fighters. It's really an amazing thing to do. The UFC is what an amazing thing that has become, right? I can remember when we first started out, I was going, oh, this is going to be huge. This is going to be huge. We're taking Mortal Kombat to another level. Yeah. And now it's real humans doing it. And I went, oh, this is going to be magic. And it is.
You mentioned Benny Urquidez. Any other fighters from over the years that?
Yeah, I think Billy Blanks. I think a lot of people think of him as Tybo, but Billy Blanks was 7-time world champion.
People do not know.
Oh, that's the baddest guy on the planet. I'm sorry. If he was in the UFC, he would have been the greatest champion ever.
At his peak, the stories that people tell, because I wasn't around when he was fighting at his peak, but I've talked to enough people on this show and off this show that talk about him in competition, and they talk about him as if he could teleport.
Yeah.
That he was that fast.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I trained with him for about 6 weeks, and he patted me up, put me in the dojo, and I was trying to spar with him. And he was wearing a baseball cap. Okay?
Yeah.
I couldn't hit his baseball cap for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That's just defense. And then he would just blister me. The guy could bench press like 400 pounds. He was unbelievably strong.
Big, strong, fast.
I saw footage of Billy Blanks actually going and jumping in competition over a guy's head, doing a flip, kicking him in the head, knocking him out, and landing on his feet.
I've heard a number of those stories.
Oh, you've never seen that in the UFC? I've seen guys but never flip over him. No. He was ungodly athletic. His brother was a great athlete too. I played basketball with him. He could dunk with his elbows. This guy was just ridiculously athletic. And Billy was such a help. Oh my God. And I worked with Garrett Warren, he ended up becoming, Chad was a great stunt guy, but he was not necessarily a great kicker. And they wanted a lot of real flashy stuff when we were doing Raven. And so they wanted my stunt double to be able to kick crazy, and I can't, I can kick okay. I can kick somebody's head, but I can't kick the lights out, 15 feet above my head. Although I could put my foot through the basketball hoop. I could jump up and kick through the basketball hoop when I was in my prime. But Garrett Warren was really amazing. He was truly amazing. He's now, he did a lot of the stunt coordinating for the Avatar movies.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he was.
Some creative choreography in there.
Yeah, he's the coordinator there. There's a lot of action in that thing.
Yes.
And so Garrett, then it became my stunt double, and then I trained with Garrett for a long time too, and we would work out. And that show was challenging. It's challenging to do action for television because you know if you think about it, it takes 8 days to do an episode, 7, 8 days to do 1 hour show, but you might have 2 or 3 different fight sequences in that one show, and so that's going to take you 6 to 8 hours to shoot one fight, and so you got to stay warm. And so it's like a basketball player going off the court. You got to kind of keep yourself
Yeah.
warm and stretched out and everything because you got to go in and change an angle and shoot it again. And so in 7 days, you got 3 of those days are going to be nothing but 6, 8 hours of action.
Yeah.
So it's really, really challenging physically. And you know, my body was kind of breaking down after about 10 months of that. And so I don't
It's
know how anybody could do that because if you go back and watch the show, which I suggest everybody does, because I think it was some really good action in it and some great martial arts. And I had Billy Blanks there with me every day. I had Jeffrey Mata was in the pilot. Jeffrey Mata trained me so well. Al Leong, the great Al Leong, he helped me with my training as well. So many great. They were so kind too, you know, because so superior to me and yet made me feel as if I could do it. It's great. I like that whole group, you know. And it's a small group, but it's you know, they're tight. They're really tight people and good people. Let's see who else. James Liu. Do you know who James Liu is? Yeah, James Liu and I did a sword fight in the pilot over fire. It was like a catwalk, and we're doing it with fire everywhere in this. I can imagine what it did for everybody's lungs in that shot, but that took us like 4 or 5 hours in a burning building doing you know, a writer writes it, but you actually have to do it, you know, and
like you
so
said, no CGI. I think people
none. So when we blew
misunderstand.
stuff up, I was in the shot. It's scary when something's getting really blown up behind you. You don't
Yeah.
know how far it's going to blow up. Because I've been burned, and you know, I told you that one time I got shot was in my character of Raven. I'm supposed to run. It's a drive-by shooting, and I'm running in front of a truck. But in order to make it look like the bullet holes are hitting the truck, what they do is they drill holes in the bullet where the bullet holes are, and then they bondo it up and put a 45 charge on the other side of it, and then they have little wires that go to a switch, and the guy hits the switch, bang, 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 bang. And so I told him, I said, you know, I want to be looking at the camera so you can see it's me, but don't get ahead of me because you won't see the shot for one thing. And the other thing is you're going to shoot me because that's coming out there like a bullet. The bondo is hard. It's rock. And so you put a 45 charge on the other one. That's a bullet that's coming out of that truck.
In some ways, that might be harder than the lead of an actual.
Yeah, it's more dangerous because it's bigger. It can take you out. And so it hit me in the chin, slit my throat, and I was bleeding all over the place. I chased that guy off the set. So it was crazy. So I did that. I've broken my knees in an accident. One time I was, I have a little fear of heights too, because in Raven, one time I was supposed to be dangled off of the edge of one of the hotels. It was like 35 floors, and so they didn't have a rigging for it. So they just said, well, let's have 2 of the Samoan guys that were the bodyguards there hold my ankles. And I was an idiot. I did it. How stupid is that?
You know what's funny is everything you're saying about maybe these roles with slight modification to the sentences. Most martial artists can say things about that. You know, oh, we were sparring and we did this, or we were running this self-defense scenario and we did this, or we went to this competition and we did this, and I was so stupid and I cut under my chin, or I got stabbed with a knife during some scenario work or something, right? Yep. So I've always appreciated the synergy between acting and martial arts, because there's such a strong physical component, but there's also such a strong expressive component. And I suppose if all you do within the realm of martial arts is combat, the expressive component is less relevant. But if you're, when you're working fundamentals, when you're working forms, if you're presenting in competition, there's an acting component. The
Totally.
closest I ever get to acting is doing forms in competition.
That's right. It's
I go to a
performance.
different place. Yeah.
Well, it's performance. Is that you have an audience
Mhm.
that changes everything,
It does.
right? It's one thing to do it's acting or martial arts or performing in anything without an audience. It's much easier. But then your brain goes through a transformation when you get in front of people. It's called critical situation. So it's your brain is functioning differently. Your amygdala is firing off, which is your ancient little almond-sized part of your ancient reptilian brain, and then all that chemistry gets released in your body, your adrenaline, but also opiates, and so your brain is actually not processing the information the same way. So it's easy to get hurt. Many times I got whacked, hit in the face, eyes poked, because just when you're rolling camera, everybody's got the adrenaline's flowing. So if you miss a mark and I'm doing a spinning heel kick, if you're not on the mark, you're going to get your head taken off. And that happened a couple of times where people got sent to the hospital. One time I was doing there was an incident in France when it was really late night, and we were doing another one of those drive-bys with the bullet holes in the car. And I had already had the experience of getting my throat cut with it. And so I told there was a French director, had never done it before. And I said, wait a minute, what are you doing? And so what they did is they actually, in France, they have curbs that are really high. And in this shot, it was at night, it was like 3:00 in the morning. And so the light was actually reflecting from the window of the car into the lens. So instead of actually just rolling down the damn window, what they did is they picked the car up and put it on the curb, so it was on an angle. So all of those squibs that were going to shoot out of that car were shooting down at the street in front of it. And so what they wanted us to do for the gag is that my scene partner, which is my co-star, Christian Burgess was his name, standing right next to me, and we were supposed to dive under the car, in the front of the car, and then the bullets, and I went, whoa, no. That's dangerous. And then I asked the stunt coordinator, and he said, it's going to be fine. And I went, okay. He wasn't sure. So I went, I'm not diving there. And he said, no, it's perfectly safe, in his French accent. And then I said, no, I'm driving in front of the car. And Christian, I suggest you do the same because you're going to get shot. And the director says, no, I guarantee it. You won't get shot. And I went, have you ever done this before? And he went, no. Okay. So, and then Christian started getting mad at me. He said, Jeff, it's 3:00 in the morning. Let's go home. Let's just do the thing and let's get out. I said, Christian, I'm trying to save you from being shot. So I went to the director and I said, you got to guarantee me you're going to put some skin in the game. So if you send my friend to the hospital, I send you to the hospital. And he went, okay, shook on it. And he went, let's drive by. So I dove out of the way. Christian dove in front of the car. Bap, 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 bap. And he's screaming and yelling to lift up his leg, and there's 3 bullet holes in his leg. They scoop him up, throw him into the car. I walk out in the street. Bang. Hit the director. I said, that's a wrap.
You just, oh, I love it.
And then the next day he showed up. He was fine. He just
You've gotten away with that in Hollywood?
He didn't say no. But we had a deal. We had a deal.
Right.
So I just went, you got to be careful about what you're getting yourself into, because when shit gets blown up, now this doesn't happen so much anymore because they do so much CGI now. And it says AI, thank God for that, because you're actually in it. The actors in street clothes, and everybody else is behind the camera in plexiglass, and like they look like they're in a bomb shelter, and so you're out there naked.
I get x-rays, dental x-rays.
Yes. They got lead and goggles and helmets.
It's fine. They're behind a 6-foot.
You're gonna be great, Jeff. Closer to the fire. great, great shot. So anyway, that happened. And what else? Yeah, just, you got to be careful. I was jumping over, and when I was doing the Remo Williams thing, I was jumping over these cinder blocks, and they look like concrete blocks, but they're made out of cinder, so they blow up easy. And so they're pumice. It's like a pumice rock. And so when I jumped over it, he's going to blow it up because this laser thing is shooting at me. And I land on some pads on the other side of it, do a little tumble roll. And so I'm doing it. And I said, well, be careful when again, timing is everything, right? Don't blow it up until I'm over it. Because if you blow it up, it's going to hit me. And I was really worried about my junk, so I was trying to cover myself up. And I should have covered my face because it blew up in my face and the cinder went behind my eyelids. And so I had to have that rinsed out I had to go to the hospital and get it on. And so I looked like I was, been in a fight with Mike Tyson after that. And so it took a while for me to heal. That with the burning of the eye, and so you can get hurt really easily if you're in these kinds of action sequences. And it can get out of hand in a hurry. I've been hurt more as an actor than ever as an athlete.
What I would have guessed based on these stories.
Yeah, I've broken pretty much, you name it, my elbow, knees, feet, toes.
But you're one of those rare types that's doing both the acting and a significant amount of stunt work.
What's that again?
I haven't talked to too many actors who have done as much stunt work as you at the level that you've done it.
Yeah, did a lot.
I've talked to quite a few who that's their shtick. That's what they're trying to do, but they haven't gone as far. Or I've had a number of folks that their path has been they reach a certain level of competition, the national levels, international levels, and then they transition into stunt work. And maybe they get, they do that for a little bit, and then they try to shift over into more conventional acting roles, but they've been, essentially typecast.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, there's not a lot that acting's a real craft,
Sure.
it's, so making that transition's not easy. If you're a martial artist, that's one thing, and being an actor is a totally different gig. So but the physical part of it was extremely challenging for somebody to do, especially in television. It's one thing to do films, you can recover. I broke my ankle doing a movie called Winter People it wasn't a break. It was a really horrible sprain. Mm-hmm. I was fighting with Kurt Russell, and I'm beating him up in this cabin. I'm playing this mountain man, and I'm beating him up, and I throw him outside, and he goes through the railing into the snow. And I go out there and I jump off the porch of this little cabin onto the snow, and someone in the paint department had not removed the paint can. They just covered it with snow. And so I landed on the paint can and really did a number on my ankle and went down. I was rolling around in the snow. Oh. And Kurt Russell was going, "Oh, you really hurt yourself. I thought you were just a really good actor." And so we ended up having to, my character gets drowned in the water. So after I healed my ankle, my character ends up getting drowned in a frozen river by Kurt Russell's character. The movie's called Winter People. I'll never do another movie with the title Winter, that's for sure. So his background of his character is sort of a Norwegian guy that likes to take ice baths. He's immune to it. So it neutralizes the size of my character and the meanness of my character by getting me in that river. And my character's pretty drunk too. And so we're drowned. So this took 2 nights. I'm in a dry suit. It's frozen. It's Banner Elk, North Carolina is absolutely cold. It is so cold. And so we're in this river. And I don't know if you've been in frozen river in your head underwater. It's rough on your head. And so that's the only thing that's not protected. So I'm in a dry suit with like Vaseline all over my body, just to try to stay insulated, but I have nothing on my head. And all I can hear is the director on the bullhorn going, "Dunk him again, Kurt. Dunk him again." And so I'm like, "Oh God." So I'm under this ice water, right? And so we did that 2 nights. And the third night, the director comes up to me and he goes, "Okay, we're going to go in tonight." And it was like 12 below. The river had frozen. There was absolutely no way that we're getting in this river that I could think of. And I said, "So how are you going to break the ice of the river? It's different than the night before. How are you going to match that?" He goes, "Oh, we're going to drive a truck over it." And I said, "What? You're going to drive a truck over the river and break the ice?" "Yeah, yeah." Well, it sounds ridiculous, right? And it's in, well, how are you going to get the ice chunks out of the, and he goes, "Oh, we're going to just take electrodes from the generator. We're going to stick them in there. We're going to heat it up and try to see if we, I said, "You're serious? You're not kidding me?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah." So I walk over to Kurt's trailer, which is about maybe, 100 feet away. And he's in his pajamas. It's in the middle of the night. And I go, "Kurt, we're getting in the water tonight." And he went, he started laughing. He said, "The stunt guys left." And I said, No, we're getting in. They're setting up the shot now." And so he put on his parka, his little boots, and his little pajamas. He walks down to this tree. The producer and the director underneath the tree. Ted Kotcheff was the director, by the way. He didn't want to do it either, but the producer was kind of forcing the issue. And Kurt says, "We're going in the river tonight?" And the director went, "Mm-hmm." And he looked at the producer, "We're going in the river tonight?" And he goes, "Mm-hmm." And then he said, "You know what? I got the balls to get in that river. And Jeff's got the balls to get in that river. But I'd never have the balls to ask someone else to do it." And he walked away. I thought, yes, heroic. And so they tried. They never broke the ice. We never ended up having to shoot it. They couldn't get in the river. And so we ended up shooting the last part of that sequence of me drowning in the river in Malibu Creek in Los Angeles. It was like 80 degrees. They snowed it in. It was comfortable. We're having like drinks.
It's on the beach, on the
Yeah,
banks.
you couldn't tell the difference. You could not tell the difference in the shot. So, and I ended up getting hypothermia from that. I went to France. I had a girlfriend in France at the time. I went there. I was in the hospital. I got so sick because I thought I almost died from, pneumonia because of just being in frozen river. So you got to, protect yourself a lot as an actor. I think that, it can get dangerous, especially with heights. I don't like heights.
Sure. I don't blame you. And I haven't even been dangled by Samoans.
I got a story for that too, if you want to.
Let's do that, and then I'll ask you my question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you can go ahead.
Oh, my story. I was doing a film with the great Chris Christopherson.
Yeah.
All right. God rest his soul. And we were in the middle of the Indian Ocean in a place called the Comoros Islands. You ever heard of the Comoros Islands?
No.
Yeah, right. It's like on the other side of the planet.
Okay.
Okay. So it's in between Mozambique and Madagascar.
Okay.
In the Indian Ocean. It is so remote, and it was incredibly remote there. So there's like one hotel. When we were there, I don't know what it's like now, and my character, it's based on a cyclone that's happening. So the end of the picture, my character gets blown away off of this lanai porch of the 6th story of this particular hotel room. So I'm literally hanging on a pole that's attached to the building on the porch, and they're going to put me in a rig where my body's in the rig and my feet are in the rig, so I look horizontal, like I'm really being blown by the wind, right? And then it was a cheap film. They had a airplane engine, a prop engine that they had rigged on the side of the. Now we're 4 stories up from the beach, and it's nothing but rock underneath me. And so they've taken the cable on a line that I'm dangling from, and they strung it all the way down to the parking lot of the hotel. You can see this is going to get bad, right?
You see where this is going?
And so they're going to. I said, "How is this going to happen?" It says, "Well, you're going to get pulled down the line by the truck. We're going to have the truck start and pull you down the line." And then, well, how do I stop on the line? And there's, well, we have some guys that are going to help you break it. And I went, oh God, right? So, and I don't like heights already. I'd already done Raven, and so I get on this. Well, first of all, I said, I'm going to test it first. So they put about 200 pounds, 300 pounds of sandbags in the rigging, and they pulled it down the thing, and it worked fine. Okay, and I'm going, oh God, now I got to get in it. So I got in the rigging. They turn up the thing. Now you can't hear anything too when this engine's going.
Mm.
So we're playing this thing. We're going to do all the dialogue in post because there's no way you can hear with an airplane engine going on 10 feet away. And so it's really windy, really loud. And they have built a scaffolding on the outside of the building to put the camera, which is about maybe 4 feet away from me. And that goes all the way down 4 stories. It's an incredible shot. It's a lot. They spent more money on the shot than they did the movie. And so I'm hanging on this thing, roll camera, and Christopherson is like reaching out for me. It's a character from the hotel room hanging onto the wall and reaching out to grab me. And I'm hanging onto this pole, right? And the rigging gives way on my body, but not my feet. And so I'm falling head first to the rocks, and I reach out and I grab the scaffolding of the camera crew outside the building. Now I'm outside now, not on the porch anymore. I'm outside of it, and I'm hanging on to one rung of the scaffolding, and the crew's right above me. Nobody does anything. I'm hanging there. They're all freaking out. If I let go, I'm dead. And so they run down, they grab me, and it takes like 2 or 3 minutes. They're holding me there to let go of my feet from the car. I had to take the rigging off of the car. And I finally got pulled back onto the scaffolding and never did that shot. So this is one of the reasons why I'm not so good at with heights anymore.
Yeah.
It was so weird.
I would imagine you don't take a lot of zip line tours.
I've already done my zip line stint.
That's all I could think of when you were setting that up was I've been on some zip lines that I thought were going to go in that direction.
But I just, anything can happen,
Sure.
They say, okay, I'm going to drive this, and, things can happen in a hurry, man. And it happens, Murphy is going to show up, the whole thing about Murphy's Law, it's going to show up. So you got to be really, really protective about, how you're setting up a gag but there's so much of it anymore. Is that it's amazing that more people don't get hurt. Or I think they also, people do get hurt, but they keep it under wraps for the most part, They don't want that to be the main story of the movie. But
my understanding is the insurance.
Yeah.
The bond on the movie is that there's a lot of stunt injury that just kind of gets pushed to the side.
Yeah. Well, the Bond company ended up taking over, I think, the movie Winter People, because we were up in the mountains and it was so cold that the roads froze over. So we lost like 29 cars. And so they're all rentals. It's a rectum. They just couldn't stay on the road. And so the Bond company took over the picture because they were just going, how do you guys all drunk? And it was a dry state. There was no booze at all on the mountain. It was just that it was so bloody cold that we couldn't keep the cars on the road. Couldn't keep the trucks and the cars on the road. It was really wild. That was a wild shoot. That's why that movie, The Revenant, wow. I know the logistics of that was insane, just like we were doing with Winter People. It was insane. You're dealing with real weather. That's hard on a crew, hard on a cast. Yeah. So anyway, it's getting to the martial arts part of it is that, again, I think it saved me in a lot of ways. You know, just being a martial artist, I got saved in so many situations. You know, just being prepared for the worst. You know,
Some of
so
that sounds like the worst.
yeah,
Uh,
I'm
but
like, you know, I think I've, you know, I got, you know, 9 lives kind of a thing going on
you
with,
must.
yeah, I felt like I was, what's that movie where it, oh, it's the turn, it's, I don't know, where everybody thinks they're going to die and their time is up. And so death keeps following
Oh,
them.
yeah,
Never
the
mind.
Final Destination.
That's it. Very
Yeah,
good. Very good. Yeah, it sort of felt like that for a while.
I,
So,
I, I believe it. So here's my question for you before
yeah,
we kind of wrap, because the roles that you've taken are always fun, but I imagine that there are roles that you didn't take, didn't get, got to the 11th hour, five auditions and they went
yeah,
elsewhere. Anything else that our audience,
yeah.
along the
Batman.
martial arts?
Batman. I was in the first Batman. I tested for it, met with Burton, everything. I came up with the Dark Knight, and he was just going, I don't know what that is. You know, so, no, so he went with Michael Keaton, who is Michael Keaton's a comedian. You know, it's a totally
Yeah,
different kind of character. But then eventually, Chris Nolan took it to the place where that's where I liked it. I
those are my
thought that.
favorite ones.
Well, that's what I thought what Batman was. I mean, anybody who puts on a
Yeah.
costume and goes and chases the bad guys and has a alternative, you know, he's so duplicitous. It's sort of like
Yeah,
Raiden and Shao Kahn.
right.
You know, he's Bruce Wayne, suave debonair, you know, but then he becomes he's the scourge. I mean, that's how I portrayed it. And so I got close to
Right.
that. I got close to Dracula with Francis
Mm,
Coppola. I remember
okay.
auditioning with Gary Oldman. We were testing for that picture. And Jim Morrison in the Doors movie, because I sing too. And so I went in and I told, you know, he, you know, I really do like the director very much. He was good to me, you know, but he was looking at when I first went into the office with the director. He looked down at my photo and he was reading my resume and stuff. Wouldn't look at me,
Mm.
and I was playing Jim. You know, I was in the room with him, and so he said, "Well, your manager and your agent seems to think that you're the second coming of Jim Morrison. What makes you think you can play this part?" And I went, "What makes you think you can direct it?" And I was playing Jim, you know. So he finally looked up and he went, "All right, okay, all right." And then, "Can you sing?" And so then I sang a couple of tunes for him and anything. So anyway, so I came back, you know, quite a few times. And then he called me in one day and he said, "You know, I'm going to go with Val." And I went, "Oh no." He said, "But I want you to play Ray Manzarek." And I went, I can't play Ray. I got to play Jim." Okay.
Mm.
I was an idiot. You know, I should have played Ray Manzarek. I should have been in the picture. But I ended up doing the Doors musical after that with the Doors. And so Ray Manzarek was in the band
Well,
and he
what a trip.
produced
How was
it and
that?
everything. And so it was awesome. So I got to play a rock star for like 6 months. It was fantastic. And so it kind of came full circle for me too, because after I didn't get the part, I went to do the show in France. And so Jim Morrison is buried at Père Lachaise in Paris. And so I went to his grave and I had a drink and a smoke there with him. And sorry, man, I really wanted to be you. I really wanted to play you and honor you and all this stuff, man. And so I came back and then I ended up auditioning for the musical. I got the musical. I ended up doing that with the Doors. And when I was younger too, I ended up playing in a band with John Densmore. So I played with all of them. It was really quite wild. But
Right.
yeah, I gotten close to so many, you know. It's funny though, when you're in the business and you've been there for a long time, it really comes down to like 4 or 5 actors,
Yeah.
you know, because you're sort of in a niche, you know, you're either an A player, a B player, C player, but those A, B players are constantly, you know, vying for the role. And sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. Maybe you're the right size, the right coloring, whatever the case may
You
be.
you you click with whoever you're reading with. You click
That's
with
it.
whoever's making
Yeah.
the choice at the
When
table.
I auditioned for the first movie of Mortal Kombat, I auditioned for Johnny Cage,
Huh.
and I read with Cameron Diaz.
No
She
way.
was, yeah, she was going to play the
Be
female.
Sonya?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And she didn't get it, and I didn't get it. But Larry Kazanoff was in on that, and I think that from that led to me doing the television series
Mm.
later on. So yeah, it's funny how the industry is that how close you're either it's feast or famine, right?
Mm.
It's either it's sort of like golf, either
Here's
either you're winning or you're
this.
losing.
Right. My favorite little bit of Mortal Kombat trivia is that when the game was created, Johnny Cage was intended to be Van Damme. That's who they were thinking of. So you get all the
Makes
noises
sense.
and everything, and you look at it in hindsight and you go, "Oh, makes complete sense."
Yeah, yeah. Wow, he was a big star.
Yeah,
I mean, that right foot is pretty amazing.
sure.
So yeah, yeah, that was fun. I auditioned a couple of times for that, but yeah,
Are you are you still auditioning? Are you still going?
no, I'm directing and writing more. I'm a
Okay.
screenwriter as well, and so I co-wrote the Bobby Darin story with Kevin Spacey,
Oh,
which is
cool.
a whole other story. I mean, it's really kind of wild story, but I co-wrote that, and I've written like 25, 30 scripts.
Oh, nice.
I have in my studio. I'm working with some other filmmakers, and we're putting some stuff together. But I'm directing primarily now. I'm directing a play here in San Diego. Probably in September, we're putting together the cast for that.
Hmm.
And I've got a pilot that I wrote with a friend of mine, and we're trying to get that off the ground. And it's yeah. So I'm mostly behind the scenes these days. But the last thing that I did was I was doing a play. I did a play here in San Diego called The Humans, which is a wonderful play that I saw on Broadway, and I really wanted to do the part, and so I got a chance to do that.
Oh,
But yeah,
nice.
I've been primarily working more as a coach
Huh.
and as a writer director than I have as an actor recently. But I
Mhm.
haven't stopped acting. I just have been focused on other things right now. But yeah, I love directing. I directed a pilot a couple of years ago that I'm trying to figure out what to do with right now. I shot half of it. I still don't want to shoot the other half, but we have to raise some money, and I don't know if I could
Mhm.
even get my cast back together again. So yeah, it's an interesting journey, but having a good time. But you can go to my
Yeah. Please.
studio
Where should
and
people
see what
go?
we're doing.
Websites and all that.
Yeah, it's a Jeffrey Meek studio. You can look at jeffreymeek.net. You can see where we're doing some stuff, and yeah. So I'm primarily just working more as a writer now. I wrote a movie about a woman who just she's figured out a cure for diabetes
Mm.
and her journey, and she's from uh, old Yugoslavia when it was in the Soviet hands, and now it's I think New Macedonia or North Macedonia. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I've been making my living doing that more than anything. So love it. But
That's great.
yeah, still
I,
training.
I don't I don't think we've had, we've had some certainly had actors who shifted into directing, but I don't think we've had anyone that's been, I'm going to call it well-rounded
Mm.
with all the writing, all the directing, the acting, the stunt work. That's it strikes me as an old approach to Hollywood
Mm.
versus the newer, more
Well, I'm
specialized.
old.
But when I look at something, I in the same way that I look at martial arts, you know, I've never been an advocate for I'm just going to be this part of martial arts. I want all of it.
Yeah, me
It
too.
doesn't mean I'm going to be exceptional at all
That's
of it or
right.
even really good at all of it, but I think all
Yeah.
of it, and let's see if my comparison seems to hold here. The better I get at any one of it, the better the rest of it
Yeah,
gets.
yeah. It all came around
So,
organically this way too, is that
mm,
first of all, I wanted to be an actor because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a fireman, and I wanted to be a soldier, and I wanted to be a doctor, and I wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to be, a sports figure. And I didn't know. So I thought acting, at least I can dabble in all of them. Right. So if you're lucky. And so I got lucky, it was that. But the writing led from acting. I was doing a play with an actor friend of mine. I said, "What are you doing in between gigs?" So we got together and we started writing together. Jack Nicholson says, he says the reason he's a good actor is because he's a good writer. You got to know how to tell the story.
mm,
And so when I was doing my television series too, is you're working in new material all the time.
yeah,
And so I had input to this after a while. You start adding stuff or you try to figure out, the writer would write something very quickly. And so it might not be coming out of your mouth naturally. So you try to figure out how to shape the dialogue so it actually becomes more natural. And so there was that. And, I've done a lot of theater and, it just adds up after a while. And so I thought, well, let's write in between gigs. And so we got successful with that. We wrote something that got some heat. It didn't get made, but it ended up being tossed around in Hollywood for a while. And so we went, well, maybe we can do this, And so I started writing on my own after that. And then the directing part of it is I started directing, when I was doing the film with Chris Christopherson, I did all the B camera stuff. Chris was doing something with Marissa Berenson. And so I had like 2 or 3 weeks off. And so I told the director, I said, why don't you just give me a B unit and I'll go out and I'll do a bunch of really beautiful stuff and do a sequence. And so I started doing B camera stuff and I started, helping out with that when I was doing my series. And so it kind of happened organically over the years, was why not write? Why not direct?
yeah,
Why not act and direct and write and produce and you do different kinds of martial arts. I love Taekwondo, but I also
mm,
love Wing Chun, and I also love, Aikido and Jiu-Jitsu and uh, kickboxing and boxing and wrestling, and I think they're all so spectacular. So why not have, variety is the spice of life, right? So I've always felt that I wanted to, partake in. I'm just interested in life too. I think that helps a little bit.
I think that's a great way to sum up what I'm hearing is you're open. You're open. There's more. Let me try it. Let me do it. Let me learn from it. Experiment with it. And
Yeah, and not be
I
afraid to fall on your keister. You're going to fail. I think that if you're going to get confident in anything, you got to be willing to fail at it. And so it's your relationship to failure that makes you really good at something. You want self-confidence? Well, how do you get self-confident? Well, you got to try it and fail at it
mm,
over and over and over again until you get it effective and good. And then that's what virtuosity is that you gotta have a work ethic of practice and practice and practice and practice. And I think in this day and age too, it's hard to do that because everything is sort of a soundbite anymore. And it's hard to really kind of compress your ideas and to really know how to practice in a way that is deliberate. You
mm,
got to know how to deliberately practice, and that means physically deliberately practice because you have to put it in a shorter period of time, maybe and know how to focus on your practice if you're studying for something or you really want to do a part, and how do you get really good at that, quickly. How do you train for a particular, I always felt that when I was doing the martial arts in films, it's really just a scene. So the acting helped me with my martial arts, and my martial arts helped me with my acting. So um, knowing how to deliberately practice and having a duration of failure. How do I keep going at this even though I feel like I can't do it? Well, use the analogy of juggling.
mm.
Do you know how to juggle?
We start with one.
Start with one. Then you start with two and toss it to hand. Then you throw in the third one, you're going to drop it a lot. But instead of going, oh shit, why don't you say, aha, I know what I did. The arc wasn't right. The timing wasn't right. I was thinking of something else, whatever the case may be. But that's how you can, and then you throw in the fourth ball. But acting and martial arts and all of that stuff is, for me, it's how do I spin, and how many balls can you keep in the air? How many plates can you spin? But that's duration of focus. It's really a question of how that you go about learning something and really teaching yourself to be good at something that you're not good at. A lot of people, I think, give up, if they feel like they're fail out at the first time. It's like, you ride a bike, you fall down on the bike. Do you just put the bike away and never get on it again? I don't know, man. And again, with martial arts too, is that you can get in trouble with that too. What if you get in a competition? Some of these fighters, it's amazing. You can lose the fight, get beat up, get knocked out. Are you done? Well, I think the greatest ones, they get up, and that sense of resilience in the work too. It's work ethic. My dad and mom, I think, kind of, they were just that way. They came out of the Depression and they didn't know any other way to do it, but just really work hard. And I'm not quite sure that, I think it's kind of I don't know. I see people that really are successful. I think they're just really hard workers too. And grindy. It doesn't mean they're any better than anybody else. It just means they're grindy. They have grit. It's a lost term. Grit, man. Yeah. Right?
People want it instant, and none of it. If it's going to last, it's not instant.
Right, and the joie de vivre of being alive, and that you got something to look forward to, of learning to do something and getting better at it, getting stronger, being able to suffer through the failure so that you can actually be good at it. That's a muscle. You got to really develop that. I think it's a skill, though. I don't think it's a talent. I think you can learn to do that. You can you can really train yourself to be that kind of a grinder. But you got to be okay with not being okay, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's
one of my favorite things to say. Yeah.
Right? Isn't it? It's just, it's so true though. Is that, I don't like going to the gym and working out. I like having gone to the gym and worked out. Yeah. So, and I think that's what it is too with a new skill. There's a skill in writing, there's a skill in directing, there's a skill in acting, there's a skill in martial arts, and each one of the disciplines. There's a skill in how you go about doing anything, I think. And I think what it boils down to is that I also wanted to live artfully. Is that my life ended up becoming the project. And I failed at this many times. So but I keep thinking that what gets me out of bed most of the time is that I'm just going to try to live artfully today. Try to be the best version of myself today. And I usually don't make it, but I think that's the effort. That's the fun of it. Is that how can I be efficient and effective? These are all good questions, I think, rather than, oh God, I got to do the dishes today. Yeah. So it's a living artfully, I think, is really the key for me, but it's not easy to do, especially when you have so much loss in the world and we're on this existential trip of death and destruction. It's a hard thing to keep buoyant. But I think it's the trip, So I think that's why it's been kind of a progressive thing. And over the years, after a while, if you do something for 10,000 hours and you try to do it well, you're going to get pretty damn good at it, regardless of your talent. I know a lot of talented people don't work much, but I know a lot of skilled people that work all the time. They have a little modicum of talent that they've actually crystallized. You know what I mean? Is that those are the people that get things done. And Yeah, it was a great lesson to have that when I was growing up with my pop and my mom too. I've got good folks. That helps too.